Good Monday, Cuppasalesjoe. Why do we loathe Mondays? Is it because we just expect more of the same and maybe last week wasn't what we expected it to be? I thought a lot about this recently when I had a very challenging but successful week. And how many times do we not allow ourselves to put those two things together? Challenging and successful. And why do we perhaps not equate them? I recently heard someone who is involved in the scientific venture to define happiness is that first, it's not a destination, but rather a direction. And that a companion to happiness, fulfillment, comes from a day spent moving forward, accomplishing something. And that something is usually progress against challenge. To welcome challenge is to recognize a path toward fulfillment and happiness. In reality, what I realized is each Monday is a chance for me to do something different, to do something new. Maybe it's to have a greater impact on someone that you really haven't been able to recently. Maybe it's just doing something completely different. There are lines of demarcation in our lives and our work, such as a Monday, a new quarter, or even a new year. And that sometimes gives us an excuse to think about the future when we're not in the habit of doing so. But if we can use those times to do a level set, a reset, and orient our minds toward the good things that we know rather than the bad things that we know, I think it's a great opportunity and one that we frequently miss. These are opportunities to grow, to learn, and to progress, in addition to performing. But let me work into the music today. You've heard a bit of it already. But let me play a game I have before. Would you believe that this music is something you've never heard from a band you already know? Try this one. Could that have been Stone Temple Pilots, something you haven't heard? How about this one?
Burning flames dance across the sand. Blood and ashes on my lips.
Was that maybe some lost old Genesis music? Here's more. How about that being Pink Floyd? And here's one last one. I don't know about you, but I'm quite sure I heard Soundgarden. Well, guess what? While those could all easily be spot on, they're all wrong. This is all from one band that I recently got into. Maybe you will too. This is King Buffalo.
Riding through serpentine with eerie grace, and drink once more from the river.
So you may be familiar with the idea of how we learn. We have a storehouse of already known facts, and when we come across something new, we compare it to what we already know. In other words, we decide whether it fits with what we already know, or if it doesn't, and we handle it accordingly. So, if I already know quite a bit about a particular area, let's say how to paint something or how to be organized, and I hear something new, I will ask mentally, does it fit with what I already know? And if it does, then it's pretty quick to learn and assimilate into our body of knowledge. But what if it doesn't fit? What if it's different? What if it goes against something that you already know? Then we have one of two things to do. We either dismiss it and don't believe it, or we look at it closer, close enough to create a new space for that information. And I'm going to show you later how we do this. But for now, Just realize that when we're talking about learning something new or coming across something new, or just evaluating information that we get, we're always measuring it against what we already know and what we already think. That's why many times when you're learning something, it helps to have an open mind, to not judge too quickly what you're learning or hearing. We could in some ways relate to what we call the beginner's mind, or what's called shoshin in Japanese. Now, what if all you've experienced recently has been challenge and difficulty and negativity? That's a body of thinking and knowledge that you're carrying with you. Now, you come across something that counters that, such as somebody else's good news or an opportunity that comes to you. It goes against the current trend of negativity you're used to. It actually offers some positivity. But what do we sometimes do? We look at it with a bit of skepticism. Look, if everything has been challenge, difficulty, and negativity, but now you're telling me something else, I'm not sure I believe that, or that it fits with my current thinking. In that case, there are your two options. You can let it go and just ignore it and don't believe it, or you can take it in and work with it, despite your current body of knowledge and thinking. The reason I sometimes will affiliate music you may not have heard of before with music that you have is this very reason. It's much easier when we can connect what we already know with what we are learning. For example, there may be some of your clients or customers who can't connect with your value proposition. They may have experience with your company or services in the past that completely counters what you're saying. That's why sometimes we don't get the sale. The customer has a preconceived notion about what you're talking about, and it is our job in some ways to connect it with their current situation or experience or body of knowledge. We can only know that if we ask and spend some time getting to know what's important to them and what their experience has been. I promised you earlier that we would understand how we learn and how to best take things in that may be counter or different to our current understanding or experience, but may be useful for us. The way that we do this, and I hearken back to one of my first sales jobs, where the sales manager would elect someone from the team to do a talk each week about something either they knew very little about or they weren't performing well. Some of you may have experienced this as well. Now, do I agree with this idea from a learning and development standpoint? No, not really, because the only person that really benefited from that situation is the person giving the presentation. Because when we are tasked with teaching and leading others, we start to think differently. But what if every single new thing you learned or presented you with, I asked you within 3 to 4 days to teach it to someone else? Would you listen to it differently? Would you take that information in differently? This is the key to learning. Listening to understand so deeply and so intimately that you would be able to present it or teach it to someone else. Again, I think this works for each of us, but I have to say, the presentations I did back then were not really beneficial to the group or the team. But they sure did show me how I can best learn new information and make use of it. I believe that when we are learning, we are fulfilled. And there are ample opportunities to learn. But we need to have that learning mindset or that beginner's mindset and open ourselves up to it. So, this week, use this insight and see each new thing with an open mind and hear it with a mind to know it well enough to use it or teach it right away. If you'd like to dig more into this, listen to Another Cup, How We Learn, on my YouTube channel. And of course, have a great week.